What is pneumococcal disease?
So pneumococcal disease is a group of diseases that are caused by a bacteria. Most of us are probably pretty familiar with the flu because we get our flu shot every year, and that is actually caused by a virus. The difference with pneumococcal disease is that it's caused by a bacteria. The name of that bacteria is Streptococcus pneumoniae, and it can cause a variety of different diseases. The three that we're most concerned about are diseases of the lungs, that's called pneumonia, which a lot of us are probably pretty familiar with. The second is an infection of the bloodstream, and that's called bacteremia. And the third is an infection of the lining of the brain, and that's called meningitis. So all three of those infections are actually quite serious, and all of them can be fatal, so pneumococcal disease is something to take very seriously. Certain groups of people are more likely to get pneumococcal disease, and those that we're concerned about the most are people that are 65 or older, or people, and adults in particular, who are 19 to 64 who have certain medical conditions. So if you, for example, have diabetes or heart disease, or if your immune system is impaired for some reason, like if you have HIV, or if you're a smoker, you're more likely to be susceptible or to catch pneumococcal disease. So in those groups of people, we want to make sure that they're vaccinated for the protection against the pneumococcal disease.
How is pneumococcal disease spread?
So pneumococcal disease is actually spread by close person-to-person contact. So the most likely way that someone will catch pneumococcal disease is actually by being around somebody who has the bacteria and either coughs or sneezes. And those droplets from the coughs or sneeze will go through the air, and then the person who catches the disease from them will actually breathe in those droplets. So if you're around someone who has pneumococcal disease, it's very important to kind of keep your distance, to try to make sure that person is shielding their coughs and their sneezes, and to be as careful as you can not to contract the pneumococcal disease.
When do I need to get the vaccine? I've heard that I might have to get 2 shots. Is that true?
So yes, for some people it is true that you do need 2 shots to help prevent pneumococcal disease. So we've got 2 that are on the market for adults. The first one is brand name Prevnar, or you might know it as Prevnar 13. The second one is brand name Pneumovax 23. So these vaccines each work in slightly different ways, and they also protect against slightly different types of the pneumococcal bacteria. So if we're talking about adults that are age 65 or older, the vast majority of those people will need both types of that vaccine. So they'll generally need that Prevnar 13 first, and then 1 year later, they'll need the Pneumovax 23. And the great news about that is, unlike the flu shot, once you've received both of those vaccines and you're over 65, then you are protected and you don't need to receive any other pneumococcal vaccinations. For our younger adult population, those age 19 to 64 who are at high risk that we mentioned, those with diabetes, cigarette smokers, and other chronic diseases, they will need either the Pneumovax 23 or the Prevnar 13, or potentially both. It depends on their specific risk factors and specific medical history. So if that is your age range and you think you might be eligible for the pneumococcal vaccination, either one or both, make sure you talk to your healthcare provider, and don't be afraid to step up. Even if they haven't brought up the fact that you may need this vaccine, go ahead and ask. It can't hurt to be your own advocate. You can say, hey, I think I might be at high risk for pneumococcal disease and I want to make sure I protect myself. Is this something that I need? And it can start a conversation with your provider.
Does Medicare pay for the shots?
So the great news about having Medicare coverage for the pneumococcal vaccinations is if you have the Part B part of Medicare, which is the doctor's office portion, that pneumococcal vaccinations should be covered for you. The way that works is you can receive 1 pneumococcal vaccination, and then 1 year later you can receive the second different type of pneumococcal vaccination. So as we talked about earlier, most adults 65 or older will need the Prevnar 13 vaccine, followed 1 year later by the Pneumovax 23 vaccine, and in that sequence, that will be covered by Medicare Part B. For adults that are younger than 65 who have those specific chronic conditions that would make them eligible for pneumococcal vaccinations, that should be covered as well, but you may want to talk directly with your healthcare provider and consult Medicare just to make sure you've got the intervals spaced properly and that everything is covered fully for you. Other good news is most commercial insurance also will cover the pneumococcal vaccinations for people that are eligible. But if you have any questions, I would encourage you to contact your insurance company directly before receiving the vaccination.
What if I forget to get my second shot? Will it still work?
So we have specific recommendations, at least in our older adult population, to get both pneumococcal vaccinations. So what will happen if you only do get one of them? The answer is essentially you will have partial protection, but you won't have full protection unless you get both vaccines. So there was some research that came out about 3 years ago that caused a change in the CDC's guidelines for pneumococcal vaccinations because we discovered that older adults that receive both types of pneumococcal vaccinations will have optimal protection against pneumococcal disease. So it's great if you get one vaccination, but if you get both, you will definitely have more complete protection against all types of pneumococcal disease that are available in those vaccines. For adults that are younger than 65, there are certain groups that do only need one of the pneumococcal vaccinations. So in that case, the studies have shown us that both of those are not needed for those groups. So if you're not sure whether you need one or both and you're under 65, make sure to have that conversation with your healthcare provider to make sure that you get the vaccines you need.
Are the vaccines safe?
So it's great to be thinking about these sorts of things and asking these questions. We want to make sure that all the vaccines we receive are safe. We've already talked about some of the great benefits of getting a pneumococcal vaccination. We can prevent pneumonia, we can prevent brain infections, we can prevent blood infections. These are all very potentially serious diseases that we want to make sure that we have optimal protection for. But on the flip side of that, we want to make sure that the vaccines we receive at the same time are safe, just as they are protecting us. So a couple things to think about when getting your pneumococcal vaccinations is that the vast majority of people do not have any side effects or they have very minimal side effects from these vaccines. So as you're probably aware, these vaccines are given in the upper part of the arm, right below the shoulder. So most of the side effects are localized. So they happen right around where that vaccination is given. So you might see some redness, you might have some tenderness in that area. Some other side effects that you could potentially see is some tiredness after receiving the vaccination or a low-grade fever. So, a fever that's not very high, but it's something that you may notice. Fortunately, with the pneumococcal vaccinations, the other side effects tend to be relatively rare, but there are several sources that you can go to if you would like more information on that. So one reliable place to go to receive more information on the safety of vaccinations is called a Vaccine Information Statement, or a VIS. That's provided by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and there's a couple of ways you can access that. One, any provider that's giving you a vaccine should give that to you that you can read through before receiving the vaccine. And also, if you have access to the internet, they're available online. So all you need to do is go online and do a search for pneumonia shot, VIS, or pneumococcal vaccination information statement, and you can pull that up and have a look at that information. So that will give you some very clear evidence-based information to read about so that you know exactly what the safety has been shown for these pneumococcal vaccinations. And again, when we're talking about medical treatments, whether they be vaccines or any other type of treatment, we always want to look at risk versus benefit. The benefits to getting a vaccination greatly outweigh the risks. We want to prevent those serious pneumococcal diseases. Even though we are having a small risk from the vaccine, the benefit really does outweigh them in the protection that they provide us.